Influx of Torah scholars. Many took the Rav's advice, and thus it came about that Dubber Mizzle was privileged to acquire a number of young men, well learned in the Torah, who would soon made their influence felt in the spiritual uplift of the community. Rabbi Gavriel saw a twofold task before him. First, he sought to get the Balabatim of the town to attend the Shiurim, which he arranged for the newly wed scholars to give. And secondly, he tried to persuade these scholars that they should, in addition to their studying, do some manual labor, as for instance, gardening. In this way, he felt that they would better understand the people whom they were trying to influence morally and spiritually, and would better please the Almighty too. For is it not written, the study of the Torah is better when accompanied by practical application? Rabbi Gavriel also established a yeshiva in Dubber Mizzle, but unfortunately it did not last very long. Despite the failure of the yeshiva to continue its existence for long, the Jews of Dubber Mizzle nevertheless all showed a desire to choose yeshiva students to be their sons-in-law, so that in the course of about 12 years, the town presented an entirely new appearance in the spiritual field, and it was all due to the deep and far-reaching influence of Rabbi Gavriel. People flocked to listen to his sermons, which very often dealt with the beauty of peace and purity in family life, as well as about other matters of daily interest and importance. Among the new scholarly young men who had arrived in Dubber Mizzle, there was one named Yosef, whose father-in-law was a remarkable personality. His name was Chaim Yitzchak, who was known either as Chaim Yitzchak the Jester or Chaim Yitzchak the Nobleman. He earned the first nickname on account of the fact that he took it upon himself to attend all Jewish weddings and amuse the bride and bridegroom and mechutanim. He never charged anything for his entertainment, whether they were rich or poor. He felt it was a great mitzvah, one which he had taken over from his grandfather, a great scholar and tzaddik. His grandfather used to spend all his days in the study of the Torah, and begrudged any time for anything else. The only exception he made was to take time off to attend weddings and entertain the bride and groom. He was a wonderful musician with a most beautiful voice. When he used to sing, people simply could not tear themselves away. He used to accompany his prayers with the sweetest tunes imaginable, and he also took upon himself all sorts of hardships, such as fasting and spending his time in solitude. When he emerged to attend a Jewish wedding, he would invariably tie a big handkerchief over his eyes while he sang and danced, so that he would not have to look upon the women present. He continued entertaining at weddings until he was well advanced in years. And then he passed on this mitzvah to his grandson, Chaim Yitzchak, who was also very musical. The reason for his second nickname was due to the fact that he was a constant visitor at the castle of the parts of Tevke, about 2 to 3 miles distant from Dubber Mizzle. This nobleman always sought his advice and made no important move without him. Chaim Yitzchak's son-in-law, Yosef, came from Minsk, where his father used to manufacture ovens, but not just ordinary ovens. His ovens were smoother and better than anyone else's. They also retained heat for a much longer time. He prided himself on the superior quality of his ovens, which were so smooth that one could never find a crack between the bricks. Yosef's father was a great scholar and a God-fearing Jew, as well as a capable worker, and Yosef inherited all his father's talents, both as a scholar and an oven maker. In fact, he made such a name for himself that Jews all over tried to procure his ovens, particularly for the manufacture of matzahs for Pesach. Rabbi Gavriel was not slow to take advantage of having such an expert in their midst, and calling a meeting of the heads of the community, he urged them to see that an oven was procured from Yosef, large enough to make matzahs for the whole Jewish population of the city. Yosef built the oven for the Dubber Mizzle community, but refused to take payment for it. Orders poured in from every source, even from the nobles, who had heard of Yosef's exceptional skill, but he refused the order, saying he had to devote his time rather to Torah study. When he saw how great the demand was, and that something ought to be done about it, he chose a few suitable young men and taught them the work of oven manufacturing, hoping he would himself remain free to devote his time to study. But the demand far exceeded the supply, and he was reluctantly compelled to continue with his oven making, tearing himself away as quickly as he could to his beloved studies. He was a great admirer of the Rav, Rabbi Gavriel, who was fast becoming famous for his sermons and lectures. Congregations from near and far clamored for him to come and address them. He was also recognized as a brilliant scholar, and people said that he was no less learned than his famous father, Rabbi Zachariah Yerucham, with whom he was often in communication in connection with Torah matters. Rabbi Gavil's brother, Rabbi Yechezkel, who lived in Polotsk, became the father of a boy 2 years after his marriage. The child was physically weak, but had a very alert brain. His name was Zvulun Mordechai. When he was only 5 years of age, his father died, so he went to live with his grandfather, Rabbi Zachariah Yerucham. Rabbi Zachariah Yerucham was now famous not only as a great Torah scholar, but also as a Kabbalah scholar, for he had spent 16 years studying Kabbalah under the mystic Rabbi Nachum Tovia, and another 10 years under his successor, Rabbi Zundel Yosef. The orphan boy Zvulun Mordechai refused to think about his weak physique, but studied with zeal and ardor. Besides his teachers, his grandfather also taught him, and his enthusiasm was such that he studied not only the Torah but also Musar for the improvement of his character. At 12 years of age, he was already quite a scholar, with a clear idea of the way he should live. He chose to isolate himself from people, the better to concentrate on his studies. In the year 1697, the Gaon Rabbi Moshe, the son of Rabbi Mordechai of Posen, living in Minsk, sent a special messenger to Rabbi Zachariah Yerucham, inviting him to accept the post of Rosh Yeshiva in his place. Rabbi Zachariah Yerucham then sent Zvulun Mordechai to his other son, Rabbi Gavriel, in Dabra Mizl. When Zvulun Mordechai arrived there, he seemed to shrink into himself even more than before. He was very serious by nature, like his father had been before him, and since becoming an orphan, he was more serious and sadder than ever. No matter how much his uncle Rabbi Gavriel tried to cheer him up and encourage him, he did not respond. He avoided everybody, including his uncle's family, and fled to a corner of the Beis HaMedrash, where he studied Torah night and day. It was his very life. Gradually, he made the Beis HaMedrash more his home than his uncle's house, and despite every effort of Rabbi Gavriel to make him change his mode of living, he continued in his unusual and isolated path. About this time, the Rav of Dabra Mizl, Rabbi Tanchem Shmuel, died at the age of 97. Rabbi Gavriel succeeded him as spiritual head of the community, which he had in fact been practiced since his father-in-law had become old and weak. His own father, Rabbi Zachariah Yerucham, now urged him to take his nephew, the orphan Zvulun Mordechai, as son-in-law. This he did, though the lad was but 14 years old at the time. But even this did not influence Zvulun Mordechai to alter his ways, and after his marriage, he continued to live his original and isolated way.